Welcome to the Human Evolution Podcast, where we dive deep into the science, philosophies, and strategies that create real and lasting change. I'm Ori Goldstein, and here we leave traditional self-help behind and map the real terrain of true personal development.
What's new in South Florida? Anything crazy going on there?
So as you know, I always love experimenting with new things. So actually last week was the first time I worked with this interesting chiropractor that does some amazing somatic release work stuff. And here I am thinking I'm nicely balanced. Everything is great. It's like I'm the person that should be giving other people advice is the story I have going on in my mind. I start working with this chiropractor and I'm laying on his bed, and within 5 to 7 minutes, I am crying. And it's not like anything, he doesn't necessarily do any adjustments. He just makes you focus in on your body. It's actually very similar in a strange way to Vipassana meditation, where you're just going in and paying attention. And I'm sure that having done the Vipassana ahead of time definitely affected me in being able to do this more. But I just started bawling and started thinking about so many interesting things that just I had forgotten about for decades. And just these things came up. And then I saw him again this week. And the interesting thing is, it's like I can feel like that there's this conflict going on in my body right now, that half of me is feeling really great that so many things have gone on. And the other half of me is sitting there going like, I'm still off kilter, I'm still kind of like out of balance. And it's a really interesting place to be, actually. It's always great to be on this side of the receiving end of it, because then I actually know how other people feel, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, to kind of like put it in perspective, I had a friend that went for an ayahuasca ceremony recently. And right before the ayahuasca ceremony, I explained to her what she's going to expect, what's going to happen. I'm telling her, like, look, after that ceremony, your mind is going to be playing tricks on you. It's going to be a very interesting few days afterwards. I reach out to her like a couple of days after the ceremony, and she's like, I need a session. I'm like, let's jump on, let's do a session, let's do what we got to do. And she's like, so I'm so affected by the ayahuasca ceremony, I'm trying to get back to normal. And I'm like, didn't you specifically do the ayahuasca ceremony to not feel normal, to change something about you? And I'm feeling the exact same way in terms of, like, in my mind, I've experienced this shift inside of me. I've released some emotions that have come up to the surface, and it's just like an onion. Regardless how many you release, there's always going to be a few more that you get to. And there's that part in my mind that's sitting there saying, like, I just want to get back to normal. And I've got to kind of like train myself to sit there saying, no, sit with emotion, pay attention to what's going on, and let's heal it so you create a new normal. And so it's been an interesting week in that way, and like a lot of interesting things coming up, but definitely got to say, pretty powerful stuff.
So this is all a product of, so it's a chiropractor, right?
It's a chiropractor that's definitely gone in very many different directions since then. But yes, chiropractor,
Yeah.
Acupuncturist, somatic therapist, basically.
Okay, but essentially it's just structural things and with mindfulness, like you were saying, like maybe a body scan, things like that. So you get in, you lay down, and are there adjustments involved, or is it breathing, or what's the whole process?
So basically, he brings all of his skill set to the forefront. Whatever you need is what he does. But it's, as you'll discover when you do your Vipassana retreat, the whole idea is to just pay attention to your body and notice what's going on. And so what he does is he's got attached to the wall behind you, like maybe about like 5 feet behind you, he's got some elastic bands that you use for physical therapy. And all he does to start off is you lay down and he makes you grab one of the bands and gently pull with one arm. And pull down and breathe pretty heavily as you're doing it. And then all he does, he removes it, and then he says, now pay attention to the difference between your right half of your body and the left half of your body. Notice what the differences are. And it brings you immediately into your body, and you start noticing differences in tension, etc. And then he starts having you walk through that tension, and then he'll go and he'll say, okay, fine, so now I'm noticing that your neck is pretty tense over here. Can you feel that? Okay, fine, let's adjust it. Now let's pay attention to what's going on. Okay, fine, now I'm going to take an acupuncture needle and I'm going to stick it in your belly, and it's going to cause a level of irritation. And I want you to notice what that brings up for you. And so he's bringing all of his different techniques to the forefront. And the main thing that you're really doing as you're doing this is paying attention to the differences in your body. Like, so my pinky finger feels very relaxed, but now that I notice how relaxed my pinky finger is, I realize that I have a tension in my left shoulder because now I've got something to compare it against. And that comparison allows you to actually go very deep and pay attention to, okay, fine, so what's in your left shoulder? Well, as I feel it, I feel tension. I feel that my neck is pulling up. And that reminds me about how much stress I have in my life that I'm constantly doing this with my shoulders. And then pay attention to your stress. Okay, fine. Now I'm noticing that there's some fear behind that. Now I'm noticing what's going on. And you start going deeper and deeper and deeper. And next thing you know, Me personally, I'm sitting there like bawling like a little baby, going like, oh gosh, there's a lot of stuff back here.
It really truly is like a full mind body therapy session, because
Yeah.
you're going into the structural things, and you're also thinking, like, thoughts are flooding in and everything else at the same time. So is this the first time you've been to this, or you've done this before? And this,
So I went last week for the first time and then again this week. And I'm guessing it's going to be like 4 or 5 sessions kind of thing. And it's not to say that it's something that I feel like I absolutely need, like life is not working well, but like it's always good to see what else you're carrying around. And I know we've spoken about this before, and I'm pretty sure you're actually aware of the book. There's that book called The Body Keeps the Score. And there's just stuff that you get trapped inside of your body. And the more stuff that's trapped, the more likely it is that your predispositions for certain issues will show up for you. And so it's just nice for me to just kind of like peel back those layers of the onion and see what else is being trapped in my body. Now that I got rid of the big stuff, now let's deal, oh gosh, I still have this, I still have this. And then you go, oh gosh, this is actually a really big one I never even paid attention to before. Right now, I can definitely feel myself off kilter and exactly doing what I always tell my clients not to do, of sitting there saying, I want to get back to normal, as opposed to sit there saying, I want to pay attention to what's going on inside of me and deal with it so I never have to deal with it again, kind of thing. So like I can actually really come to a place of acceptance inside of myself.
and what is normal anymore, right? And so this brings me to another point. I was gonna ask at some point, because it's been now, oh, a couple of months since the retreat. I know we talked about the effects a couple of weeks afterwards or whatever. Anything since then that you've noticed? Any changes, like up, down? Anything you noticed that wasn't happening in your mind and body before you got to that experience?
I would just say that there's a lot more relaxation and a lot more comfort inside of myself. I'd say that I dealt with some pretty big things over that retreat, and that I just found a new base level, a new normal. Quite honestly, though, like I mean, in all fairness, and I think that this happens with everything that you do. That let's just say I made 10 changes, only about 5 of them really stuck, and the other 5 just weren't done in the completely right way. That they went back to normal. But at least now I've got more of an awareness towards them that allows me to start dealing with them more. And this is actually just a pretty common thing. Like, I mean, I was actually working with Nat on this earlier about the concept of people say, for example, is hypnosis or the stuff you do, is it a quick fix? And my logic is it's a quick fix if you don't deal with the issue in a holistic way. If you really deal with an issue and it's done, it is done. If you deal with an issue, but you also have things in your life that you haven't dealt with, you can be pulled back to your original issue ahead of time, back to the original issue you had, kind of thing. And so I can say, thanks to the retreat, a lot of things have really shifted. I feel a lot more of a sense of peace inside of myself, a lot more calmness around my people pleasing tendencies have definitely gotten better since then, etc. But then other things just haven't completely locked in yet, but good things to pay attention to.
A net positive overall, because the reason
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
smiling, the reason I'm smiling is because I'm going to go through that shit too, and I'm like, well, if Ori comes out of this and he loses his goddamn mind, then I'm gonna have to rescind my application. So, but that's good though. I mean, like you said, like if you do 10, try to 10 new things or whatever, as long as 2 of them stick, that's good enough for me. So on that note,
Exactly.
we're in a day and age of a lot of self help, and a lot, of course, the internet. But there's also a lot of literature and a lot of programs and a lot of gurus and all these other things that preach a lot of things, and not all of it's negative. So people are helped greatly by those things, but
Yeah.
I know that in the space, though, because we both are Dispenza fans, and we're aware of the outliers in either direction. There are some people to the one extreme that aren't like way out here spiritual,
Mhm.
and then there's the other end of the spectrum. But I think in recent years we've seen a shift we've seen a lot of good information being released that genuinely helps people, and a lot of bad information, of course, hitting, just like anything else, hitting the internet and being available to people. And now anybody can publish anything, really, whether it's a blog or a book or something like that. We'll kind of get into the whole like law of attraction and everything else. I know you've had a couple of recent thoughts, recent experiences where this has come up.
Yeah.
What to you? What's the definition of that?
So it's, to me, I believe that one of the best and one of the worst things that happened to society in the last couple of decades was that the book The Secret and the movie The Secret came out, and people became aware of a lot of things to do with the law of manifestation. And I'm a big believer in the law of manifestation, but it's Tony Robbins has a saying that I absolutely love. His like, if you've got a garden and there's weeds in it, you don't sit at home going, there's no weeds in my garden, there's no weeds in my garden, there's no weeds in my garden. They'll overtake the garden. You go into the garden, you pull out the weeds, and you plant the beautiful flowers, and you've got yourself a beautiful garden. And what I've discovered with a lot of people when they do that kind of stuff that they hear in The Secret, it sounds like that you just ignore your problems and then they don't exist. And the thing that bothers me is, I mean, my statement that I always tell people is you have to actively refuse to be in a bad mood. You have to actively force yourself to be happy, which is what I tell people. But the way I do it, and let me actually go with an example right now. So I have a client right now that is dealing with stage 4 cancer. And she was a very sporty woman before this. And we got into a call a couple of days ago, and she tells me about how she looks at herself in the mirror and she's so upset with what she's seeing. But she's seen the movie The Secret. She knows everything about positive thinking. And she goes, so I just forget about what I see in the mirror. But I can see in her face that she's not really forgotten about what she saw in the mirror. She's just telling herself, don't think about it. But the example I always give people is if I were to right now tell you, like, Lee, whatever you do, as much as you focus on right now, whatever you do, just don't think of a purple elephant. It's like the very first thing that your mind does is it thinks of don't think of a purple elephant. In the same way, she's sitting there saying, don't think about the fact that you've lost so much weight. Don't think about what that means. And so what she's doing is she's making that a bigger issue in her life because that's what she believes the right thing to do. And to me, that's what I call toxic positivity. It's like you're saying, this is what I need to do, so I'm going to forget about that. And to me, what we did in the session was instead of that, what we did was we worked on something that in psychology is called reframing, where I said to her, well, your body's fighting off cancer right now. And what if you were to actually like look in the mirror and realize the fact that you're losing weight is the fact that right now your body is not so focused on you being athletic. It's focused on doing everything it can to heal you because it loves you that much. And so what we did, and it was obviously a bigger amount of the session than that, but over the course of doing that with her, what happened was now she looks at the mirror, and instead of being upset that she's not an athlete, she feels an absolute love for her body, for how much it cares for her. So that is creating the positive aspect that now when she looks at her body, she gets the positive flood of neurochemistry inside of her that sits there saying, this is what it's all about. My body's doing everything it can. And once it heals this, I can go back to being an athlete. To me, that's what the law of attraction is about. It's about actually following the good emotions, not necessarily pushing away the bad. And just
sure.
A lot of people with The Secret never actually follow through with that concept of it in my books.
Well, I mean, look, we're humans and we always go for the path of least resistance. So if somebody says, hey, if you read this and you follow these and you think these thoughts, then like that sounds great, because it's much easier to be in denial or to ignore something than it is to face it head on. But I think you mentioned this before, how it's the wanting of things. Like I want to manifest things. And I do, in the sense that I believe in manifestation. I don't necessarily know that and again, I like about me, I'm not saying that it's not whatever, but I also think that if you have the right attitude and you like things just happen because you're making it happen. So I guess that's what it is, right?
So let's take it from a completely scientific point of view for a moment.
Sure.
Okay. So, I mean, it's been proven by science that there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically it's a part of your brain that decides what to focus on. So, and that's why like the example that's always given is if you right now decide you want to buy a Tesla car, you walk out into the road and it looks like there's Teslas everywhere, because your brain is all of a sudden focused in on the concept of I want a Tesla. So now all of a sudden it's specifically saying, forget about this. Oh my God, there's a Tesla. And you start seeing all these things that prove to you that it exists for you. Or for example, if you're in a bad mood and you go to a party, there's a better chance that you're going to see parts of the party that prove to you that it's not a fun party. Whereas if you're in a good mood, you can go to the exact same party and you can sit there and say, oh yeah, so those people are fighting, but look at how happy these people are. And that's just your reticular activating system working for you. It's like, it's just the part of your brain that chooses what is important to focus on and what isn't important to focus on. But to me, when it comes to the concept of manifestation and law of attraction, it's if you can actually create within yourself the positive emotions associated with your outcome, what's going to happen is you're going to find yourself naturally being pulled towards it because you're going to focus in on the good things that are happening. And it's your reticular activating system, completely from a scientific point of view, is going to be seeing the things that prove to you that you're doing well, the things that prove to you that it is happening. And it's kind of like there's that book, it's called The Luck Factor, that proved that the largest determinant of whether or not a person is lucky in life is how much they believe themselves to be lucky. It's because if you believe yourself to be lucky, you're going to start doing things that require luck, and you're going to forget about the bad stuff, and you're going to notice the better stuff, and you're going to start developing momentum in that way. And this is the exact same thing for you. And so for me, like that makes a very, very big difference in terms of the way that the brain works. So let's pull out the spiritual thing, but I do believe in the spiritual thing. because I do believe in the law of attraction that states that when you're in the right vibrational frequency, other things related to that frequency will come to you. In the same way that I also believe that when you walk into a room with a smile on, there's a better chance that people are going to gravitate towards you because they're going to see you as a happy person. And to me, that's the same as the law of attraction, just put into physical context.
Yeah, no, it also reminds me of, so there's a balance there too, because like, let's say I'm in a bad mood. I'm not living the life I want to live. I'm not doing what I want to do. And I'm thinking positively towards the future. But like you mentioned before, it's also important to think positive about the future, feel all the things you just said, feel lucky, like this is going to work or whatever, but also to not ignore the negative thing and just be happy with who you are. Because like we mentioned, if you keep chasing it, then you're just never happy anyway. So the whole thing is just so complicated. The human mind's so complicated. So how do you balance that out? Like, I want this and I'm working towards this and I'm thinking towards this and I need to be positive and whatever, but I also need to sit with where I'm at. Those two things seem to be, maybe it's not as hard as I'm making it out to be, but it seems like it's a lot of mental work to kind of like work through that.
So, and this is something that I believe that we've discussed before. And to me, this is actually the topic of a book that's going to be written soon enough. But to me, it's the difference between desire and need. That when you believe yourself to need something, like for example, if you are lonely and not in a relationship and you say, unless I have a relationship, my life is never going to work out for me. I need a relationship for my life to be good. You're going to look at a relationship and you're going to constantly see yourself as a person that doesn't have it. And oh gosh, why is this happening to me? Why has God forsaken me in this way? Whereas if you can actually drop your need and sit there saying, I'll be happy whether I'm in a relationship or not. If I die never having a relationship, I can still make my life a masterpiece. But God, wouldn't it be great if I actually had a great relationship too? And you raise your desire around it, but not your need around it. What happens then is you're in a place that a relationship becomes something that you would really enjoy having, and you start pulling things towards you that have it, but you don't feel bad when you don't have it, so you're not beating yourself up for what's occurring. And the other way to put that in the same way, and it's the thing I work with my clients, to me, I believe that the number one value that a person needs to have, and we kind of went over this in the 500-year experiment, that when you actually look at your life over the long span of things, it's that you need to have a high level of self-love. And to put that in perspective, my definition of love is slightly different, and this could be the topic of a podcast all of itself. But to me, what love really is the concept of just accepting exactly what is. So if I love myself, it doesn't mean that I feel good about myself the whole time. It doesn't mean that I only feel good about myself. What it means is I accept myself for my flaws too. I accept myself for where I am. And completely accepting myself means the fact that I don't need to change in order to feel something about myself. In the same way, if you love a situation and you just accept where you are and you sit there saying, I don't have the relationship, or I don't have the job, or I don't have whatever it is, but I accept what it is and I just want to have it, and I'm going to do certain things that make me happy. And as I continually do those things, I believe that my goal, my reticular activating system, the goal center of my brain is going to pull me in the right direction in the right way. And enough good things are going to happen to me that Frank will introduce me to Mary, and Mary will introduce me to Beth, and Beth is going to be my future wife. I don't know how things are going to happen, but I just trust that things will work out that way. And if they don't, no skin off my nose, my life is not going to be worse off for it. It's just not going to be exponentially better, but it's still going to be a freaking amazing life.
So you said we can't split test life or decisions. So it's wherever you end up, that path could have gone in a dozen different directions. I'll give you an example, like business wise, you could say, I'm gonna do this for work or whatever, name a profession. And it could take one person that thinks about it, that works towards it. It could take 10 years, could take the next person one. Well, the person that took 10 years says, like, well, I still made it. It's like, well, you could have done it in 1 year. But toxic positivity as a whole, society wise, I know it's a buzzword now. Have you noticed over the years that you've been practicing a shift as things shift in society? Are you seeing, and again, this is a little bit of a broader question outside of that, but how does the societal shifts, are you seeing the same issues all the time, or do things change depending upon what's in the news cycle?
Gosh, I mean, that's an interesting question in of itself, right? It's so I would say that what you have is you've got the certain people that are the complete secret law of attraction devotees that will sit there saying, like, I don't care what's happening. I'm only going to focus in on positivity. And to me, that's a healthy thing, as long as they're not necessarily ignoring the things that need to be done. But then you've got the other people that in society that it feels like there's the yin and the yang of it, that and this is an interesting thing that they've actually spoken about with social media, that for the 1960s onwards, when they came up with like the broadcasting of news, etc., there was a concept of what they said broadcasting. We're going to cast out broadly all the information that's going on. But nowadays with social media and people hitting the like button and algorithms trying to give people what it is that they want to see, what's happened is what they now call narrowcasting, where, as a matter of fact, that you keep seeing the things that you've paid more attention to. So if you read a news article, Facebook says or Instagram says whatever it is, okay, fine, this is something that he likes. Let's give him more like that. And so what happens is you start seeing things. Basically, social media plays the part of a reticular activating system for you, and it will narrowcast you and sit there saying, look at how bad things are. Like, it's so, as an example, I'm staying away from any kind of political things, but let's say a person hates Trump or hates Biden, whatever it is, and they start following Trump groups, they're going to start hearing more bad news about Biden. Or the other way around, whatever it is, it's because that's what social media is doing to you. And it starts creating that self-fulfilling prophecy of like, look at how bad things are. Whereas if you really just step back for a moment and really just look at the world for what it is, our world is probably in the best situation that it's ever been in so many ways. We're advancing in so many ways. People are living now with diseases that they didn't live with a few decades ago, a few years ago. There's probably like the lowest level of poverty and malnutrition in the world. There's so many good things happening. But when we go to social media, that's not what we see unless we specifically are the people that focus in on that. We're going to see about how bad things are in this situation because that's what Facebook knows we want to see about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've got so many, everything's just, again, it's all gloom and doom, but the statistics, I read a lot of Steven Pinker stuff. I mean, not that long ago, a few hundred years ago, just the horrendous torture and burning people alive and everything else. We've come a long way. But of course, it's easy when you're in the moment, you're in your life and you're stressed about your own stuff. It's hard to look outside of that. And like nobody who's having a bad day stuck in traffic is going to say, oh yeah, but they used to split people in half over just from leaving the church,
But let's play with that for a moment. Imagine that you did, while you're stuck in traffic, do that, right? I remember the one time I was driving and I was on the highway and I was actually late for something, and I saw and there was a huge delay on the highway, and because there was an accident that you could see way ahead of you. And the one thing to sit there saying like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to be late. This is so terrible. Or you could just step away for a moment and sit there saying, that person was in a freaking car accident. And I'm upset that I'm going to be 15 minutes late to my meeting. It's like when you put things in a healthy perspective for yourself, things tend to shift in a huge way. And this is, to me, the difference between healthy perspective and toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is sit there saying, forget about the fact that you're late, forget about the fact you're late. Oh God, I can't forget about the fact I'm late. It's like, it drives me crazy. I hate it. And you're stewing about it in your own mind. The other side is just getting healthy perspective, stepping away and sit there saying like, I really am blessed. Even if I'm late to this meeting, I've been late to other meetings and somehow the world has managed to continue to survive without me. And when you go into that perspective, you're in a much healthier, better place.
Right. That's very interesting. What just crossed my mind is by the time I imagine you have a wide spectrum of clients, people that come to you that probably just recognize that hey, I may have a problem, we need to talk. Or somebody who's been choking things down and dealing with it for 30 years, and they finally got the nerve to come up. What does that spectrum look like? How often do you get somebody, like client base wise, do you see more of, especially these days with different generational things, like the spread of like, hey, I've been dealing with these issues for a long time, I need to talk. I know I'm being a little broad right now, but it's interesting to see if people really hold on to things and they finally get the nerve to, like, what's that first encounter like, and what's, like, demographically speaking, for anybody who's watching or listening who's maybe dealing with something right now, like client wise, like what's the spread look like?
So I'll put this in two different perspectives for you. So it's when you talk about the coaching industry as a whole, I'd say that a lot of people go to see a coach over the fact of like, I want to make my life better. I want to increase the goal, etc. I think that I've kind of specialized a bit more in a niche where the saying on my website is I fix unfixable people. So usually the people that come see me are the people that like have tried the coaching and it didn't work for them, have had an issue and it didn't necessarily get their resolution that they wanted. And so I would say that coaching is an amazing, 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 powerful thing for just helping a person set goals and work towards those goals and achieve them in a healthy way. It's just that, and I do get clients that do that, but generally speaking, the clients that come see me are the ones that tried that and didn't get the result that they wanted. And then my job with them is actually to figure out the why. And like you said, and it's the most logical thing, and that's usually what coaching needs to go to as well. It's the idea of what are the beliefs that are holding you in place? What are the habits that you formed, thinking emotionally or acting wise, that actually stops you from being able to achieve your goal? And so they end up achieving the goal, but we end up usually having to go into a very deep core belief or a very deep traumatic experience or life altering experience that actually affected them.
So some of these people actually found some solace, or maybe found some help and made progress elsewhere, but either reverted back, or just they didn't address the core problem, the root of the problem. So they may have gone to years of therapy, or you name it, whatever the case might be, and they're like, okay, I feel like I'm making progress, I'm feeling good, and then they either revert back, or just it wasn't like a holistic,
So exactly. So let's jump back to the beginning of this conversation where I spoke about, for example, my friend on the ayahuasca, right? Like it's or me and the Vipassana. Like let's just say that the 5 shifts that didn't last for me are the ones that I really wanted the most. The reason why they didn't last for me is because I went back into life and I didn't give them the attention that they needed. I didn't continue to nurture those seeds. I let the weeds grow in that garden. And it's in the same way, like, I mean, if you talk about my friend in the ayahuasca experience, she went back to life and she was very uncomfortable. And in her mind, the first thing that her mind was pulling towards was, let's get back to comfort. Let's forget about everything that ayahuasca showed me. I want to feel comfortable again. And so when a person comes to see me, what I do is I want to pay attention to, what is it that left you feeling uncomfortable? What is it that's really going on there? What is the habit that you had that made you forget about that change when you did work with that coach? Because there's going to be something inside of you that sits there saying, this doesn't fit for me yet, or I don't fit into that life yet. And when you can actually figure out what that thing is and you can shift it, then the change becomes very natural, and it joins the ranks of the other changes that just naturally stuck for you.
It's interesting. We'll get into ayahuasca at some point as well. I don't know much about it, admittedly. I mean, I know a lot about drugs. I just don't know much about that specifically. but I know people do that. What's the main reason people do it? Where do people go to do it? What's the expectation going into it? And then obviously you've talked to a lot of people that have been through it. You may have even done it yourself. You might have told me, I don't remember. But like, what's ayahuasca all about? Because I'm sure we've been talking about it. People will have some questions. So.
Yeah, I consider it to be one of the strongest psychedelic drugs known to men. It's definitely taking a sledgehammer to your problems. It's the only issue is, as you take a sledgehammer to your problems, expect your life to kind of like break apart as much as you could imagine it would. It's the saying about ayahuasca is it gives you what you need, not necessarily what you want. And so it is such a strong hallucinogen that when you take it, it's going to bring up very, very, very deep things inside of you that you may not be ready to deal with at that moment. And so for me, the ayahuasca experience, extremely powerful, and it's just as powerful. I'll kind of make the comparison that, to me, I believe that ayahuasca almost has an agenda when it works with you. And I know some people will listen to this and go, what the heck are you talking about? But it feels like that there is an innate intelligence that goes on inside of you when you take ayahuasca, that it tries to pull you towards a certain level of life that it wants you to experience. And almost like your intentions be damned, I'm going to pull you here. And so, like, for example, the first time I took ayahuasca, it took me to places I just was not ready to go. And they talk about the concept of an ego death. And I genuinely, like, this is a story in and of itself that would take longer than this podcast. But basically, I hallucinated that I died. And the amount of pain that showed up for me in that moment of like, oh my God, what about my family? What about my parents? What about all my goals? I'm losing all that. But I needed to go through that in order to really learn to accept, to not control everything. That was ayahuasca's path for me. And I in hindsight, I understand it, but imagine that concept of, as you're on the strongest hallucinogen known to men, your brain is sitting there telling you, guess what? You just died. It is not a fun moment. Whereas mushrooms, for example, it's what I feel is that they are more easily guided by you. And when you take them at a high level, that's why I like so much GPRR, the guided psychedelic reprocessing and reconditioning that I do. It's what I do in that moment is, because your brain is more open, I actually work with you as a hypnotist while you're in the state, and we actually reprogram you while you're on a very, very strong psychedelic. And so, two very different things, both extremely powerful. It's just ayahuasca tends to sometimes break things along the way. Not to say mushrooms don't. I mean, I've met a lot of people that took mushrooms, and it really, really affected them in a big way. I just find that mushrooms, when done correctly and when actually guided, the shifts that can occur there are at least more controllable. Let's put it that way, at least.
Yeah, so mushrooms, you could kind of set intentions and have a plan. And ayahuasca, you're just fucking along for the ride, and there's nothing you can do about it. Kind
Exactly.
of thing. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So it's not just dredging up. I mean, I know how psychedelics work, but it's not just dredging up memories and things you've forgotten. It's just showing you things that, like you said, with the death. I mean, there's a much easier way to probably get that point across to you. It doesn't have to be such a hard reset, but I understand it though. That's got to be. I can't even imagine that.
It was definitely a very, very intense, a very, very intense experience. And I will say things do get dredged up, but not the way you expect. Because, like, I mean, back to the Vipassana or back to my work with a chiropractor, etc. These things are in your body. Your body is keeping the score, and your body does know that you have a tension in a certain place or that you do have fear in a certain place. You're just, in order to continue on in the world, in order to maintain your functionality as a human being, you kind of push these things under the surface. And then when you take a very strong hallucinogenic drug, or when you do something like 10 days of silent meditation, what happens is that part inside of your brain that's trying to keep everything normal quietens down a bit, and these things pop up. Now, as they pop up, if you're on a strong psychedelic, they pop up and they form a new memory for you. They may even remind you of something that happened, wherever that takes you. And then it's your job in that moment to figure out what to do with it. The beauty of a psychedelic is that, and what I discovered with ayahuasca, is when you can truly surrender into the experience, which is a tough thing to do for a lot of people. But what happens is when this memory pops up or whatever it is, and you surrender into it, and ayahuasca has a truly beautiful, loving nature to the experience when you can surrender into it, you see the same experience and you start seeing a much larger perspective. Kind of like what we were talking about being in traffic and sitting there saying, like, I wasn't the one in the car accident, that you can all of a sudden say, oh gosh, that did happen to me as a child. But now, with a sense of love inside of myself, I feel an enormous sense of compassion for myself for everything I went through. And I love it. And all of a sudden you heal this trauma that was stuck inside of you that you always just said to shut up before. It's a very, very, very powerful experience.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We'll have to do a deep dive on that, because again, it's popular culture now. It's also good that these things are coming to the forefront now.
Yeah.
I mean, hell,
And
you could buy alcohol on every corner, and the things that
yeah,
actually come from the earth, like marijuana and psychedelics and everything, well, not all psychedelics, but
yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, there are things now that many things that should be illegal, and many things that should have been legalized a long
yeah.
time ago. But that's a whole other conversation as well.
But another thing I actually want to bring up here is to take it back to the concept of the toxic positivity again,
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of my clients come to me and they're like, I've done ayahuasca 30 times and
Really?
I still have the same issue. And what I call it is, it's almost the same idea as a toxic positivity of, this should be the thing that fixes me, and I'm taking it, and oh gosh, I'm not fixed, let me take it again. And oh gosh, I'm not fixed, let me take it again. And the issue that happens there is the fact that they're assuming that the ayahuasca is going to fix everything for them, as opposed to the fact that they need to be a participant in it and they need to integrate the changes into their lives. So they may take the ayahuasca, notice a huge shift, and for a week be on like this wonderful high. But then, because they don't integrate it into their lives, they do the same things that they did before the ayahuasca, and they start getting upset with themselves, whatever it is, and they just go back to exactly where they were. And then they go, well, I felt great for that week after the ayahuasca, let me do it again. And they just keep going back, and they get weeks of clarity, but not getting the actual shift. And for those people specifically, the thing that's missing is the integration aspect, is being able to, how do you shift the beliefs that stop you from holding on to the shift you experienced with ayahuasca?
Yeah, that's that must be like a common thread too, also with your practice, because obviously you can't be like, I can't. I mean, as much as I would put you on FaceTime and have you follow me around 24 hours a day, so I could, like, hey, what should I do now? Kind of thing. Obviously, that's not feasible. So how do you reconcile that, like, between, let's say, between patients or whatever? I know there's homework, there's exercise and everything else, but it must be challenging and sometimes maybe even frustrating for you to have such a breakthrough with somebody, and then they come back and it's kind of, like, a lot of your job, I imagine, is trying to just keep people, making sure the integration. I'm not just speaking of psychedelics, but just treatments in
Yeah.
general, just regular treatments. That's got to be a challenge.
Yeah, and so for me, it's the way I look at it is it's back to a concept of holistic shift. That if I make a shift with a person and they shift back, that is enormous, powerful feedback for me to know that something else is missing. And so if I make a shift and they stay, then I know that we hit it at the right level. And then I also want to see, has another aspect of your life possibly shifted negatively? But if I make a shift for them and the next week they come back and they say, well, you know what, I kind of like have this issue again. What I know in that moment is the fact that that there's something else beneath that level that needs to be dealt with. It's for me, it's there's that wonderful saying, there's no such thing as failure, there's only feedback, right? So it's for my job with them is just quite honestly, it's I'm going to keep giving you the information and I'm going to keep trying to become flexible with you to see where it is that we missed a hit, that we can do it this time and actually make it last. And honestly, that's almost like the fun and the beauty of my work, that it's a detective game. It's a little game. It's a game of chess. Your old habits are sitting there saying, I don't want to shift. And my job is to sit there saying, well, the first thing your old habits need to realize is the fact that I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to be your friend. Explain to me why it is you don't want to shift, and let's figure out a way that you can actually get everything you've ever wanted.
I was going to mention when you were talking about that and just optimizing people and investigating things, and there is thrill in that. I've experienced that in a couple of careers, but yeah, if there's nothing to find, if there's nothing to fix, it just doesn't have the same appeal to it, I suppose. But that's interesting. This is very general again, but let's say you can't put an end date on things, for example. Like nobody's ever fixed, right? But there are people that probably see you 3 or 4 times, and then you have a conversation, and you meet with them, and they feel good, you feel good, and then you never see them again. And there's probably people that you see
Yeah.
every other day. Like what are the differences in those two people? Do you think that the people who feel like they're fixed are actually fixed? I mean, or do you think that, you know, that they're just in denial about something? Like, how does that
Well,
play out over the course of a client arc?
Well, I'll take it to my concept of me going to see the chiropractor. Like, quite honestly, I didn't have a strong need to go see the chiropractor. My life is actually very great, and I'm very, very happy with my life. But it's layers of an onion, right? So, like, there's always something more to deal with. There's always another level that can take you to an even higher level of joy. And that's a really beautiful thing about life. It's like, I mean, human beings are made to always want more. It's like oh, you gave me ice cream, but I kind of wanted the whipped cream and the cherry on top. Oh, you gave me the whipped cream and the cherry. I'd like a double dose, please. It's like that's just the human way of being. We always want more. And that's a beautiful thing. It's what I will say based on your question, though, is that the first thing I'll definitely say is regardless how good people may consider me to be or the results I've gotten, there's certain people I'm not right for. And I completely accept that, and I'm perfectly fine with that. There's going to be certain clients that just the way I work with them, my actual methodologies aren't exactly what they need. And I completely love and respect them for that. And I just send them on their way as quickly as possible so they can find the help that they need. But then there's the two other aspects of it are the people that I work with 1, 2, 3 times and they get a shift and they're like, you know what, I got everything I need. And I specifically tell them at that point, like, look, I'm a phone call and a text away. Whenever you need me, I'm here. It's like, and go off, live and thrive. I'm as happy as can be for you right now. It's like, and if you ever need me again, I'm here. Not a big deal. I'm always here for you. But then there's the other people that I work with them and we work on the same issue. And then they come back to the next session and I work with them and we work on the same issue. And they come back the next time and we work on the same issue. And they'll fall into one of two categories. Category number one is going to be, maybe I'm just not the right person for you. And that will happen after a few times of trying the same thing and it doesn't shift. Or category number two is, there's something so deep inside of you that we actually want to work a bit deeper on. And then we would do something like, for example, guided psychedelic reprocessing and reconditioning. Like, let's actually take it to the next level. Let's start dealing with them. Let's take you towards the mushroom aspect. Let's actually focus in on any kind of somatic releases you needed. Like, let's see if we can up the game in a different way to actually get you to where you need to be. And so there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, and for a lot of people, it's just a matter of choosing a different tool. And for other people, it's the fact that they may need an electrician. I'm a plumber, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
The psychedelic retreats that you do, we should probably mention that I know those are pretty intense, or at least as intense as they need to be for a certain person. Have you recommended that to people before, and they're just like, absolutely not? Like, have you had to have
Oh God, yeah.
that argument? Yeah, I was going to say, because I imagine most people, that are that want to come see you, and they're like, hey, I recognize I have a problem, I have to deal with this. But I imagine that everybody has their line, right? And if you're like, hey, let's go take some mushrooms, like how often does that happen where people are like, nope, no drugs?
I would say that only about 20% of the people I talk to about GPRR would actually ever go there. Maybe actually even slightly less now that I think about it. So number one is that we're talking about a psychedelic, and of course we're doing it in a legal jurisdiction. We're doing it in the safest way possible. We've got medical personnel, etc. We're doing everything in a safe way, but it doesn't change the fact that there's still that story of it's a drug. And as they hold on to that belief, it's not going to be something that they actually want to. I'm not a druggie. I don't need it. And that's perfectly fine. Then there's the other aspect of people that sometimes they say, like, you know what, I'm perfectly fine with you talking to me. I'm perfectly fine with you taking me through an NLP or hypnosis aspect, or making me listen to certain sessions that you record for me or things like that. But to take a psychedelic and go that deep into my psyche, I don't really know if I want to go that deep. Like, there are some people that it's what I say is the juice for them isn't worth the squeeze, right? Like, so they want the outcome, but they don't want the process to get there. And that's perfectly fine too. And I think that's possibly the larger group of people, that they see psychedelics as something so intense, and I won't lie, GPRR is, that they'd just say, you know what, like, I mean, I'm considering my life and I'm considering what I would need to do to get to the next level, and I'm perfectly fine where I am right now. And I wish them the best of luck, and that's fine. And I mean, we can continue working together if that's what they think is necessary, or I can help them find someone better, and they can always reach out to me for something else.
I'm just thinking about my own life and experiences, and if maybe one day we'll do that, since I'm following you around the globe and I'm doing all this stuff. But I honestly, I think it would be a great experience just all around. But if somebody said, I don't know if I'm going to like what I'm going to find, that's also a little unnerving too, because I guess you don't know what you don't know, or
Absolutely.
you don't know what you don't remember. So on the one hand, I'm like, well, what's the big deal? Just, like, don't you want to clear this out? On the other hand, I kind of get their point, So, I mean, has
Absolutely.
anybody ever dredged something up that was just, nobody want to scare anybody off from it, but
Yeah.
has
So
anybody come out of it like a negative impact, I suppose?
So I would say that it brings up negative things. And I would say if you stick with me, we deal with them and we actually heal them. But there are certain people that we bring up the negative things. And this is actually my criteria for bringing someone into GPRR is you have to trust me so implicitly that it's there was recently a client that I was going to do it with, and then I ended up telling her, no, I'd rather not, for the simple fact that when it came down to her big issues, there was a shame aspect inside of her that stopped her from actually sharing certain things with me. And I was like, this is fine when we're doing this kind of talk. When you're taking an insanely high dose of a strong psychedelic and you don't feel comfortable saying something to me, you're going to get stuck in a loop that I won't be able to help you out of because you won't let me in. And if that's the case, then we're at a place that, like, you're leaving me powerless to help you. But if you let me in and something comes up, I can tell you with certainty that not pretty much, every single person I've worked with, we're able to actually help them through it in a way that they are so grateful for what happened. But there are obviously certain safeguards in place. Like, I mean, we definitely don't want a person that has suicidal ideation. We don't want a person that has a tendency towards any kind of ecological issues. So, I mean, we definitely do that. And at the same time, like I said, we do it in a safe environment with medical personnel. So, like, I mean, you're in a place that you're as safe as possible, but you still have to let me in. And if you don't, then I can't help you. But I like to consider the fact that I filter people out as much as possible ahead of time to stop that from being the case.
Now, if anybody comes to you and they want to do it, I imagine you have a criteria. You have, like you said, there's a buildup, there's a criteria.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's hard to put because the human mind is so complicated, and pain is personal, and everybody's experiences are very personal. Have you had people come to you that in your mind were maybe not a good candidate for it, but they kept wanting to push for it? I can imagine that.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, it's like I said, there's a large group of people that I just say, like, it may be right for you, but I don't feel competent or confident doing it with you. And if I don't feel like I can pull you out the other side, I'm not going to put you in there in the first place. And that's true for my sessions. That's true for anything I do with people. I want a person that I feel confident being able to take them to the other side. And if I don't, as quickly as possible, I will let them know that. And it's like, I don't want to come across as a negative thing, but I'll fire that client for their sake and for mine. But when it comes down to GPRR, I'm that much more specific in the people that I pay attention to, in the fact that we are going as deep as you can go. And I mean, it's knowing that you're going to go that deep. Like you said, you will dredge up stuff. It's not uncommon that you start remembering things from your childhood that were just terribly traumatic, that you're oppressed. It's not uncommon that you start realizing how much hatred you had in yourself, or how much anger you had stored in yourself, or shame. Shame is actually probably like the biggest one that really, really holds people back, that they just realize how much that they've been hating themselves. And in that moment, when you think what shame is the one thing that you want to hide away from the world, right? It's like, I'm ashamed of this about myself. And when that comes up, you've got to feel comfortable enough with me to sit there saying, okay, Ori, this is the thing that I'm thinking about that really, really gets to me. And it's going to be the one thing that you're never going to ever want to mention to another person, because that is the way shame works. But as soon as you say it out loud and we work with it, you heal a huge part inside of yourself, and you come out as a completely different person on the other side.
Done
Of course,
right, though, it's very cathartic, and it's
yeah,
it's like, oh shit, if I'd known that getting this out of me to somebody years ago would have had this much. I mean, just the release just has to be amazing, you know.
that's it. It's like and I mean, you're talking about stuff that someone's been holding on to. Like a very common one that unfortunately happens, and it's a factor of today's society and the way we were raised, is very often a person at a young age gets molested, and actually very often the molestation is not necessarily a negative experience for them. It's like they're molested by an older family member, and the family member wants them to keep the secret, so they do it in an enjoyable way for the person, right? So it's what happens then is a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, whatever the age is, experience something that is actually pleasurable for them. But at the same time, even though that's pleasurable, they want to share it with their friends, they want to do whatever, and they start feeling ashamed over it because their friends don't actually understand what's going on for them. So inside of their mind, they're stuck in this thought of, there's something wrong with me. There's something that I'm a terrible being, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden they start having sexual issues, or they start feeling self-confidence issues, whatever it is. And they see this as a huge, huge, huge thing, because to them it really is a huge thing, obviously so. And now we start doing our work, or psychedelics, whatever it is that gets them there. And all of a sudden they start remembering this experience of the molestation, and they start feeling this enormous sense of shame showing up in them. And the first thing that they do is they don't want to tell me about it, because they think that they're a bad person for even having these thoughts. And the reason why I'm actually even saying it right now is because I want at least some element of our people that are going to be listening to this to hear that it's just, you were the victim of an abuse. And as a victim of an abuse, your mind shifted in a certain way, and you developed a certain story over, this is right for me or this is wrong for me, as opposed to sitting there saying, there was never anything wrong in me. Something happened to me when I was 3. And when you get that, when you actually make that realization and you release it, and psychedelics can help very much for that, what happens is all these sexual issues you've had, all these self-confidence issues you've had, all these social issues you've had drop away within like moments, because you all of a sudden realize the fact that you've been beating yourself up for no good reason since you were 4 years old, for God's sakes. And unfortunately, like I said, it's just, I mean, given today's society, there's a lot of people that ends up being something that ends up being dealt with.
We vilify a lot of things. We make things very hard to talk about. Maybe judgment's the word I'm looking for. Because I think that's what keep a lot of people from talking about stuff like that. I know Tim Ferriss wrote about it a couple of years ago, and it was very hard for him to do that.
I mean, it's really the biggest thing that I would say, if there's anything I want people to get out of today's episode, is the concept of that. As much as you're sitting there thinking that there's something wrong with you or anything else, that is the case for everyone on some level, right? That it's just like it's and not to necessarily hold your emotions beneath the surface, and sit there saying, like, as I used the example of the toxic positivity with my cancer patient, it's not a matter of sitting there saying, like, I don't want to look in the mirror, I don't want to look in the mirror. It's actually going in the opposite direction of reframing it for yourself and actually being able to see the positivity in what's going on. And the more you actually align yourself with the good things happening in your life, the more you align yourself with actually the desire to move forward as opposed to the need to move forward, what happens is you actually start creating in yourself this beautiful, beautiful momentum that pulls you in the right direction. And that is what I believe that the law of attraction is really about at the deepest level. It's definitely like the thing that I find is to be the largest issue when we go back to that concept of toxic positivity.
People need to hear it, because I know a lot of people live under those thoughts. It gets them through the day, but it's not addressing any underlying issues or anything like that. So we talked about toxic positivity. We got back into the psychedelic retreats, and again, these will be ongoing conversations because as things happen in society and as issues come up, and as you have patients, the things that happen there, as I do stupid shit, we'll have plenty of things to talk about. But let's say somebody's watching this and they wanted to work with you, or if they just wanted a consultation, like what's the easiest way for one to get a hold of Ori Goldstein?
Yeah, so we're on all the social media platforms and obviously on YouTube. You can find us on Instagram at the Ori Goldstein. We're on Facebook, same Evolution Coach Ori. And we've got the website, so Human Evolution Movement, which is actually our not-for-profit organization that's focused in on creating a group of people to actually start moving this forward and create this mindset in as many people as possible and become this tribe of inspired leaders moving the world in the way that I believe that we could really, really shift things in a big way for the entire society. And my own personal website, origoldstein.com.